Welcome back to our third measure of the economy. So every economy has three goals: economic growth, limiting unemployment, and the third one is to limit inflation. Again, limit. So we do want some, but at what level? And what is inflation? So we're going to try to break down this side then. What is inflation? What causes inflation? What's healthy and a healthy level, and what are healthy causes? And how do we calculate it out? If you've ever seen Austin Powers, you know that Dr. Evil was frozen for 30 years. So he came back and he wanted $1 million. Well, what's the issue with that? Or what should he have asked for? Because the movie was made in 1997. He was frozen for 30 years. How does inflation affect what Dr. Evil should be asking for? And unfortunately, it affects comic book characters too. Here we go. What is inflation? All right. It is a rise in the general level of prices. We cannot just look at one item like gasoline and say, boom, that means that there's inflation in an economy. It's a measure of about 300 different products and prices. So it reduces purchasing power. What do we mean by that? Well, here's what a dollar would get you in $2. It takes $2 to buy what a dollar bought in 1987. $24 to buy what $1 bought in 1913. There's a great festival in Waconia, Minnesota, every summer called Nickel Dickle Days. Guess what everything used to cost? A nickel. It doesn't anymore because of inflation. So what we're looking at is healthy levels of inflation between 1% to 2%. That is considered good for an economy. We want prices to rise 1% to 2%. What does that mean? It means that your dollar should buy you something or should buy you 99 cents worth of stuff next year, or 98 cents. Well, why is that good? Why is it good that your dollar is losing purchasing power? Well, it means that people are spending. And when people are spending, it means that they're producing. There's something called deflation, which is not healthy. It means your currency is worth more tomorrow than it is today. We don't dive into this topic. You would in a college course, but let's just keep with this: 1% to 2% inflation. So globally, you have countries that have hyperinflation or super hyperinflation. In the case of Venezuela, interesting case study, not good. The country of Venezuela caused inflation first by prices of oil declining. They're a member of OPEC, oil producing exported countries, and they would like prices to be high for oil. Actually, 90% of their economy depends on it. Well, over the past 5 years, price of oil has started to fall, which means their economy has started to slow, which the government did the worst thing possible, is they started printing money. And they've caused so much inflation that at the start of the year, a dollar equaled 3,164 bolivars. This was last summer. And a dollar then got you 8,820 bolivars. And as early as September, $1 got you 10,389 bolivars. That's a reduction in purchasing power. And that means that this economy has super hyper inflation. Check it out online if you'd like to learn more. I mean, you're literally weighing money in that country. Things don't cost bolivars anymore. They cost a weight of currency. So we're going to break down the causes of inflation and which ones are healthy and which are considered unhealthy. So the worst cause of inflation is this: the quantity theory of money, it's sometimes called, or just simply the quantity theory. If your government is in charge of printing your country's money or your currency, that is probably the worst possible thing that can happen. How come? In the United States, our government isn't in charge of printing money. We borrow money from another entity that prints the money. We're actually in the most debt to our central bank, which is in charge of printing money, than we are any country in the world. So in Zimbabwe, they were fighting a civil war. Their government was in charge of printing their money, and they did. And they caused super hyperinflation. Zimbabwe had to get rid of their currency. Germany, after World War I, had to pay reparations, war damages to other countries that they're fighting against. Their government was in charge of printing their money, which at the time was called the mark, and they just kept printing it. And it was cheaper to heat your home with cash, like this, than it was to buy wood to heat your home. They got rid of their currency as well. Venezuela, as we just described, is going through that right now, and they'll probably have to get rid of their currency as well. The quantity theory causes hyperinflation or super hyperinflation. It's just because you're printing more money. You're not actually producing more things. So there's the $100 trillion bill, which is the largest denomination of currency ever printed in Zimbabwe. And that currency doesn't exist anymore. And there's some examples from Germany after World War I. So the healthiest cause of inflation is called demand pull inflation. Demand pulls up prices. This is an aggregate demand supply graph. So we're just looking at, well, when demand goes up for goods and services, that causes prices to rise. Is that a good thing? Yes. Consumers, businesses, governments are spending money, and it means that they have money to purchase things and they should continue to be produced. So that is considered the healthiest type of inflation. Not ideal, but not as bad as quantity theory, is called cost push inflation. It's resources becoming more expensive. Hurricane Katrina destroys oil refineries. Well, that pushes up the cost of producing gasoline. Prices will rise, and that's what inflation is. So not ideal, but not the worst. So of the three, quantity theory being the worst, demand pull being the healthiest, cost push is right in between. So what we do to look at or measure inflation, the government looks at something called a market basket. Are you going to need to know this for your exam? No, but just the concept of it's 300 commonly bought items. It actually takes out things like oil because those can change a lot in price. Just commonly bought items by Americans, and it measures them. And it puts them in what's called a price basket or an index. So the consumer price index is that market basket. We're going to get rid of step one and just focus on this. What you're going to do is take your consumer price index in the current year, subtract the previous year's CPI, divide it by the previous year's CPI, and multiply it by 100. Do this first, then divide by this, then times by 100, hit equals, and you should get an answer. Why we can't have inflation in this year is inflation's a measure over time. So what we're going to do in this scenario, I'll just do one. Take your CPI of your current year, 125, minus the previous year, 100, CPI of the previous year minus 100, you get 25. Okay, CPI, divide by the CPI of the previous year, so 25 divided by 100, and then times by 100, and you get your inflation rate. Go through, get some practice, pause the video. Again, practice makes perfect, and there's no way to calculate these out without practicing. So how much should Dr. Evil have demanded? Well, there was 46% inflation between 1967 and 1997. So instead of $1 million, Dr. Evil should have been asking for $4.8 million. What about his $1 billion that he switched his answer to? Well, that would have been $480 billion in 1967. So is it good or bad? Well, who does it help and who does it hurt? It helps people who owe money. Inflation happens and you should owe, in quotations, less back over time. In theory, you should have more money. But it hurts people who lend money. It hurts people who save. It hurts without interest. That's an important piece, without interest. It hurts people who live on fixed incomes, whose incomes don't change, like somebody on Social Security. When inflation happens, they're not able to adjust their income. It's set. And people that have lent out money are missing out on money owed. So check out these scenarios, figure out if they're helped or hurt. And really quickly and briefly, when we change aggregate demand, it changes or moves along this curve. So if we had high inflation and then we move to lower inflation, we'd move to a new point along this curve. That's it for our measures of the economy. Good luck. Have fun. and we'll see you next time.